Have you ever stopped to think about what actually holds reality together? I mean, really think about it. You might be surprised to learn that a huge part of the answer is, well, just agreement. In this explainer, we're going to pull on one single, simple thread and watch just how much of the world as we know it starts to unravel. This one sentence right here, this is the key we're going to be using. The idea is that by just stepping back and deciding not to agree with something, you can see the hidden scaffolding that holds it all up. It's an incredibly powerful tool, and we're going to use it to look at everything from the objects around us to the very rules of reason we use to think. All right, so let's start with something solid, something we all just know is real, no questions asked, a tree. For our first pull on this thread, we're just going to do a little thought experiment. We're going to take our key, and we're going to withhold our agreement that a tree is a simple, objective fact. Let's just see what happens. And here's the fascinating thing. Nature itself has no idea. The physical world, it's just this seamless, continuous flow of stuff. You've got a seed that becomes a sprout, then a sapling, maybe a shrub, and eventually, if it's lucky, a giant oak. There are no neat little labels or dividing lines out there in the dirt. And that right there is the trick. The category tree isn't actually a feature of the physical world. It's a boundary that we created with our minds. We all just collectively drew a line in that natural spectrum and decided, okay, a plant with these features, a woody trunk, a certain height, yep, that gets the tree label. It's a conceptual box we've all agreed to build together. So what's the real difference between our idea of a tree and a totally made-up word, like, say, a trog? Well, the only meaningful difference is that billions of us have agreed that tree is a useful and valid category. It's a concept we made up that succeeded simply because of mass consensus. And this brings us to this really big idea, intersubjective agreement. A tree is real to us not because of some cosmic law, but because we all agree that it is. This shared consensus is like the invisible glue holding our entire conceptual world together. Okay, so we've seen how this works with a physical object. That kind of makes sense. But how deep does this rabbit hole actually go? Let's take our key and apply it to something that feels way more fundamental, way more unshakable, the laws of logic themselves. The 3 laws of thought. This is the absolute bedrock of all rational thinking. For centuries, philosophers have basically said these are self-evident. They're so fundamental that they don't need proof. They just are. So let's do it again. Let's withhold our agreement. What if these aren't truths about the universe that we discovered? What if they're just the foundational rules of the game we all play called reason? What if, just like the category tree, we just made them up? This gets us to the idea of a presupposition. You see, the laws of logic aren't proven by reason. They're the things you have to assume are true to even begin reasoning at all. They're the starting conditions you accept without question that make the whole system work. And here is the perfect trap. You literally cannot use logic to disprove the rules of logic. To even try to build a case against them, you have to assume that your argument is true and its opposite is false, which means you are using the law of non-contradiction you're trying to attack. It's a classic catch-22. So what does that tell us? It tells us we agree to the rules of logic not because we can prove them from some outside perspective, but because the only alternative is just gibberish, a complete breakdown of meaning. Their power comes from our collective agreement that this is the only coherent way to think. Okay, we have unraveled categories. We've unraveled logic. So for the final step, let's take our key and apply it to the ultimate system for understanding reality, modern science. Now, I know this sounds pretty provocative, but just stick with me here, because it's a really useful way to look at things. This is not an insult to science at all. It's an analogy to help us see that scientific authority, just like any other kind of authority, is also built on a foundation of social agreement and trust. I mean, think about it. Both the shaman and the scientist act as a bridge to a hidden, complex world for the rest of us. They each have their own specialized tools and languages, rituals and chants on one side, the scientific method and equations on the other. And here's the most important part. Their authority isn't automatic. It's granted by the trust and consensus of their peers and their community. This shows us something really profound about how science actually works. The scientific method, peer review, trying to reproduce results, these aren't just cold, objective procedures. In a way, they're social rituals that are designed to build that intersubjective agreement. A finding only really becomes a fact when the wider community of scientists looks at the evidence and agrees, yep, this checks out.
And this goes all the way down to the deepest assumption of science. Physicalism, the idea that only the physical world is real, that's not a fact that's been proven by science. It's a philosophical presupposition. It's an incredibly powerful and useful one for sure, but it's still the shared agreement that provides the entire framework for how modern science operates.
So what have we actually seen here? Well, from the simple act of naming a tree to the fundamental rules of logic we use to think, all the way up to the scientific facts we rely on to understand the universe, our entire reality is constructed on layer after layer after layer of these shared, collective agreements. So recognizing this trick, that so much of our world holds together simply because we all agree it does, that doesn't make the world any less real, but it does give us a kind of power. It gives us the power to see the invisible agreements we're living inside of, to question them, and maybe, just maybe, it gives us the freedom to choose what we agree to next.